Welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining us. We've got a lot of people on this webinar, so we're absolutely delighted. Thank you for joining us and welcome. So we've got 4 great guests here who have all graced us by getting out of their pajamas and dressing gowns and being with us today. We've got David Orr and Tony Clifton from Fencor Packaging, Martin Canwell from Aptean, Respond in the UK, and Michael Kileen from the wilds of Connemara in the west of Ireland. Hello, Michael.
Well, it's wild and westy and windy out here today, I'll tell you.
So look, we're going a bit freestyle today. There's no slides, there's no corporate schmoozle. We are just going to have a good old chat. So please join us in questions. Please ask us questions. Please send in questions either using the chat buttons or the messaging or the Q&A. And we'll get to them as we go along, or we'll get to them at the end, or we'll get to them at some stage. There's 4 banned words today that none of us are allowed to say. Trump, Biden, Boris, and Brexit. Okay, so anything else goes, but those words are not allowed. So we're going to have a good positive news day today. And just a brief, quick introduction to everybody. At the top of the list, we got a really good story for you. Fencor, as I mentioned, are based in Peterborough in the UK. They have 150 employees. We've got to know David and Tony over the past 8 months really well. Their story is uplifting. And it's really very little to do with packaging per se, but really more to do with genuine decency, taking an opportunity when it presents itself, and about delivering real cultural change in a company. It's really a fantastic story. We also have Martin Canwell from Aptean Respond. And Aptean are a complaints management platform. They have 5,000 customers in 54 different countries. So it is a massive organization, and we're delighted to have you, Martin. They really believe in the power of customer experience to change the world and change the way we view customer complaints. So Martin will tell you a little bit more about his company and what he's at. And we've Michael Kileen, who is our chairman in the CX Academy and also runs the CX company, and who's probably going to interrupt and make a bit of a nuisance of himself. But he might also spread a little bit of wisdom about the place and give us some insights for 2021 from his experience. So I think without further ado, I think David and Tony, if you just sort of tell us about the roller coaster ride you've had in 2020, and off you go. It'd be great to hear it.
Okay. All right, Julian, thank you for that very warm welcome and lovely introduction. I'll start. So we are a manufacturer of corrugated packaging. We have 2 divisions. One makes what you might call conventional brown boxes. The other is what you might term as end-of-aisle corrugated displays. Very different dynamics, but all using corrugated board. And the story really starts in that wonderful incubator in early March, the Cheltenham Festival. And I met somebody there who said, because we were all wondering what was ahead of us, and we had this big fog of uncertainty in front of us. And I met this fellow who said, we pay our staff 75% of full pay when they go sick. And I said, that's what we should do. Went back to the ranch and said to everybody, if you fall ill, because this was before furlough, so a lot of uncertainty. If you fall ill, we don't want you to come in. We want you to stay at home and self-isolate for 14 days. And we understand that statutory sick pay, which is 90 quid a week in the UK, is not enough. So we'll pay you 75% of full pay to stay at home. And that went down really well with our staff. We sort of got them on our side. And we then started to look at the end game, the bigger picture, and we decided that, rightly or wrongly, the competitive landscape was going to change dramatically, and it was going to be worthwhile emerging strongly. So we prepared what I call our slit your wrists budget, where we, an 18 million pound business, we were going to lose 5 million pounds worth of sales in 9 months, and we were going to shed £1 million of losses. I went to the bank and I said, we'd like you to cover it, please. And they wriggled a bit, and I said, no, I want you to cover it. And eventually they came up with quite an imaginative response. They said, okay, if your cash reserves get to 750,000, you can have a Sybil's, which is in the UK, it's a government-backed facility, especially for COVID, Sybil's loan of 850,000. I said, that's all I need. I just don't want to worry about cash. So we had the sort of finances sorted out. We then went to the staff. Before we did that, we did a thorough risk assessment, and we decided that we were going to implement totally segregated shifts. We were going to put in thorough cleaning routine. We were going to do rota systems week on, week off in the office, social distancing. We had a strategic reserve of senior staff who stayed at home in case people fell ill, and they could sort of helicopter in. We introduced temperature checking. We did everything we possibly could. The most important thing we did was we went to the staff and we said, right, we're going to get through this together as a team, intact, and the key words, no job losses. And you've got to remember that this was in March when we just didn't know what we were facing. No job losses, no financial damage to any employee. However, we have to stick together. We have to be there for our customers. Now, what then happened was extraordinary. We got some extraordinarily concentrated demand. A lot of our customers stopped buying. Some went bust. Some were online-only companies anyway, and they went mad. And others pivoted their business to online only. And we had recently installed a high-speed production line at the end of February. And there's an element of serendipity, but I'll come to that involved with it, an element of good fortune. And the demand, the spike in demand that we had from those customers almost overwhelmed us. And if we hadn't have made the investment we made in February, we would have probably drowned. So the recent investment, and only last year we'd installed a specialist that suddenly came into its own. However, what was the most rewarding thing was the response from the staff. And they were telling the operations director, whatever the company needs, nobody threw a sickie, managers rolled up their sleeves and were working on machines. The crews worked through their bank holidays and through weekends. I wrote to every member of staff every week to tell them how we were doing as a business and thanking them for their adaptability and their resilience. So far, touch wood, we've only had one confirmed case of COVID out of 50 employees. We've probably had more, but only one has had a positive test. And we are now busier than we've ever been. In recent months, we've had to take on another 25,000 square foot warehouse. We've had to invest in a new die cutter. We've had to invest in a new taping machine. We've had to invest in a straight line gluing machine, a baler, and a new pallet press. And this is simply because we harness the faith of our customers. They have stuck with, because we were there for them during the really difficult time, they have stuck with us. And the demand is, and in particular now that we've gone into a second lockdown, the demand is extraordinary. I mean, November is full, and we're actually got to the point where Tony and his team, sales team, are communicating with our customers saying, you need to get all your orders on this side of Christmas because we're getting full. So it's been an extraordinary ride the last few months. We are very lucky, but someone once described luck as where readiness meets opportunity. We have the opportunity, but we've worked very hard and reacted very quickly to make sure we're ready for it. So that's the story.
That's really it's really uplifting and really interesting, David. How have the staff reacted, and have there been any? I know that all sounds like a really good sort of story. Have there been any sort of negative sides to this at all? I mean, how have the staff reacted, and how have you empowered them?
So I mean, I'm going to let Tony speak in a minute. We had a tiny bit of resistance when we stopped the segregated shifts because everybody was exhausted, and the shop floor were very happy to come back onto a single shift. Getting the office workers back in, and there has been, in particular people who have indulged in furlough in the UK, there has been a concept called the reluctant returner. We had a little bit of that, but you know, we got through it, and we've got everybody back in. What are we doing now? We're so busy that we can't return to the former way of working. We're just being as careful as we can do. Tony and I are in separate rooms. He's in the room next door. We're just being as careful as we can.
Brilliant.
However, in all of this, you know, I don't want to doff my cap to you guys because it's really your fault that I've had to spend all this money. You know, we've actually invested £900,000 that I didn't think I had to, that I was going to. And we went through the CX training, the deployment, the certificate training during the course of the summer. And it really made us realize that we had to invest in whatever shape or form that our customers needed us to. And the decision was made so much easier to do all this stuff, to take all this extra commitment on, having done the CX course and having sort of seen things through those eyes, having walked in our customers' shoes, having seen it from their point of view. I'll let Tony tell the story about one of our larger customers who visited us, and we had to lay all this on the table for them. I'll shut up.
Yeah, Julian, just going back to your original question, getting the staff on board, the engagement. I mean, CX played a massive part of that. It really made the difference in keeping people on the same page, on track, and working to the plans that we had been laying out, really. And if I just go back to the very beginning, David and I, we've been looking for something to help us engage with the staff, train people, lift the standards from the bottom up in our business. We've been looking for a long, long time. And when this came along, David said, look, have a look, what do you think to this? And I said, what, CX, what's that? We started looking and probing, and we realized that this is probably the thing, the vehicle we've been looking for to get the frontline people in our business involved in and take it forward. And May this year, when lockdown had been in place for a month or two, it really started to show when we started the CX in May that people immediately were engaging with it. They were switched on and they were quite enjoying the course. It really made a big difference. It helped us really to stick together, believe in our plans and improvements for the business through that difficult period, and come out the other end in better shape. It really was very, very helpful.
Tony, can I illustrate that with a wonderful story of a situation that happened? I think it was in May when we got let down by our board supplier really badly and shockingly. We were told at the last minute that they weren't going to deliver what we needed. And I was up in the office when the poor girl who was having to deal with the customer was delivering this information. And he said, but you can't let me down. I've got a product launch. My whole business is reliant on this. And we went into the board stores and we found some board that we'd rejected. And we managed to use it, manufacture it, deliver it, and the customer came back to us and was eternally grateful. And the following week, we got a new customer from a referral from him. So we turned him into an advocate. But what I loved about it was the way in which that female member of staff dealt with him. And we learned so much from the course. She was apologizing, she was seeing it from his point of view. And actually we all were, and we were absolutely determined to try and find a solution, which we did do. So it was CX, you know,
Textbook.
large, it really was.
Yeah. Textbook stuff.
But what's great about this as well is that you guys get it so much. So we always talk about leadership buy-in and how important leadership buy-in is for CX, but you guys are the epitome of that. I mean, you absolutely get it and you understand it, and it comes from you guys. Sorry,
Yeah,
Tony, I interrupted.
Julian, the thing that surprised me actually after finishing the CX, initially we thought it was just front-end staff that would benefit. But the deeper we got into it, and by the time we'd finished it, we realized there was other people which are behind the scenes in key positions within our business. They need to go on this course.
Yeah.
So they can understand the implications of what they're doing for this business.
Yeah,
It's
brilliant.
massive, you know.
Martin, can I bring you in?
And the supplier who let us down needs to go on this course as well.
Martin, can I bring you in and ask you, how does this resonate with you, this kind of a story and your whole company and how you look at things?
Yeah, well, look, I think the first thing to say, and then I'll give you a bit of context in terms of what we do in our industries, but I think everything that David and Tony is talking about, it resonates across different industries, because this is ultimately about people.
Yeah.
People and doing the right thing for people. And you called it out earlier, you know, this isn't about packaging as such. This is just about doing business and doing the right thing for people. So we, of course, in what we provide, you know, we are close to the circumstances where customers feel like organizations aren't doing the right thing for them. You know, we deal in with complaints. There's a lot of dissatisfaction. So I think just a bit of context as to what's happened. So, of course, going back to, you know, March and early lockdown, we first of all, because within Aptean we have been through the CX courses as well, we were very much focused on, well, what do we need to do for our customers, our business customers? How do we need to understand them? How do we be there for them? So there was a lot of contact from our people that look after them to make sure that they've got the right things so that they can serve their end customers. So we made ourselves available, we set up webinars, we were talking to people, calling people. And what we realized quite quickly, which is a good thing, was actually our customers didn't actually need us that much in those early moments, because the product that they had from us was working, they were able to use that from home, they had a lot of what they needed. And so, but it gave us that peace of mind of, first of all, you know, we're not missing a trick, we're not missing something that customers don't need, and that they know that we're there for them, and they know that they can contact us and ask us for help if need be. So, but of course you've got their experience, so you've got what they're doing for their end customers. So what we saw across the different industries and globally, kind of in terms of what we cover, is some industries, complaint volumes actually going down. You know, there was an element of the things that drove complaints weren't happening so much. So if you're in financial services and industry and in insurance, people aren't driving cars and not having accidents, and therefore they're not complaining because the claims process, you know, generates a lot of those complaints. So you've got a lot of that going on. There also seemed to be a lot of tolerance from customers. They understood that organizations needed to do something different. They needed to completely change their operations. And it seemed like they were really patient around that. And so a lot of service complaints actually kind of sort of went down. Now, of course, there's industries as well, which we work in, where that was different. So kind of retail and particularly travel went through the roof because they had particular difficulties, they had real immediate needs. And so, you know, those companies had to handle that kind of volume. So, so very different experiences there. But going back to the financial services space, what there is a sense of is that there is a storing up of complaint volume that's going to come further down the line. Okay, so I think a success story that we should be celebrating is that, you know, the regulator, the financial services regulator, is asking companies to do some very important and helpful things for customers. You know, payment holidays, mortgages, credit cards, you know, freezing all of those things, making individual plans. And that is so important. And that's going to help a lot of people whilst they have some short-term impacts on their income, or where they find new jobs, whatever that might be. But it's not going to save everyone. Yeah. And so, you know, and there's real recognition of that. And so alongside all of this, particularly in the financial services world, there's a conversation around vulnerable customers. You know, there has been for some time, but the FCA updated their guidance in July of this year, and COVID just really brought it to life that anyone can be vulnerable, because particularly when you talk about financial impacts, you know, we could all be vulnerable in some form or another. And so I think one of the successes for me at the moment is the conversations that either I've kind of facilitated or been part of, joined in, seen run by everyone else around vulnerability and around trying to understand vulnerable customers and what are their needs and how can we help them. And yes, there's always going to be categories of vulnerable customers, but it's almost getting to a point where it's categories of one. Like, we need to understand the individual that's in front of us and do the right thing for them. And what I've witnessed is, in joining those calls, in, you know, building network on LinkedIn, is more and more people with the job role of vulnerability in their title, you know. And there are a lot of organizations that I think are building capability within their organizations in order to understand and handle these vulnerable customers and make sure they get the right experience and the right outcomes. And I love this. And when we caught up the other day in preparation for this webinar, the quote that David kind of brought around this kind of, you know, opportunity meets readiness, just, I think it gives me hope in this situation, in that I really believe that for some companies, the readiness that they're doing now, the work they're doing now to upskill their employees to understand these things, I'm really hopeful that a lot of that is going to be in place when these issues really start to impact customers end of this year, Q1, Q2 next year, when a lot of this extended help, you know, will have ended. And so I think there'll be losers in that situation as well. There won't, you know, not everyone will win. And I do see examples of where a lot of this focus on customer and trying to do things differently for customers seems to be trying to be generated bottom up. There isn't always that senior leadership buy-in and engagement that actually David and Tony have demonstrated.
Yeah, which is great from David and Tony's perspective.
Absolutely, absolutely, and it's massive, you know.
Mike, can I bring you in from the wilds of Connemara? Sprinkle a bit of wisdom on this. How are you seeing all this, and what are you seeing? What are you looking at? Maybe talk us through a few trends for next year.
Well, I think I probably should start out with the story about Joe Biden, Donald Trump, and Boris Johnson going to a bar called Brexit, and it just goes from there. No, sorry about that, Julie.
Brexit bar.
Listen, no, I'm fascinated. I think this is just a great story, and I think when I look at, I've been doing a piece of work for, and I've been speaking a lot about the trends for 2021, with particularly around COVID and so on. But when you apply those trends, and some of them are really relevant to what David and Tony have shared with us earlier, and I'm just going to kind of put those down. One of the key trends, and it kind of comes from that kind of insight that leadership teams the world over, they really want to invest in CX. They're all hearing about it. They're all engaging with it, but they're just not 100% sure about it. And I think what they're recognizing, and David, your story brings this to life, we all need this emotional intelligence now. And I think what you found is that you probably would not have had the success you had without your leadership team having a really deep understanding of what CX is about, why it's so critical, etc. And so many times we're working with large corporations, growing corporations, and they, you know, that comes later and it slows everything down. So I would say you're going to see in 2021, you're going to have this huge investment in executives understanding the emotional side of things, because they want to motivate and inspire their people. So that would be the first thing. The second one I would talk about specifically to your story, David, was CX is not fluffy. And this is kind of interesting. So many business disciplines around over the years, they are very easy to understand in the early days, and then they become very complicated. And then we invent all of this jargon around the discipline, and people are like, what in the name of God are we talking about here? And I think what you guys have proven is you've kept your conversations or your communicate with staff very simple. Once you start getting into business talk with a lot of staff, they lose you. And they're like, oh, crikey, here we go again, more of this stuff. You know, we don't have the resources, we don't have the time. And I think how you guys have applied that has been absolutely superior. I suppose for me, and my advice to anybody on this particular webinar would be, I think there are two really key trends for 2021. The first one is around that insight that consumers around the world, you know, they've less money, unfortunately, in their pockets, but they have more time on their hands. And what's the implication of that? I think from my perspective, I think basically consumers are now seeking best value deals, particularly online. So when I go online now, if I'm about to order something from a site, etc., I'm always looking for that first time offer. Or, you know, when I finish on a site, I'm chased with remarketing, and they're always saying, you know, here's a better deal, etc. So we're becoming very customized around this whole area of value deals. So what I say to everybody and all the businesses out there, we've got to prepare great value deals for our customers. That does not mean, however, that it's a price package. I think we have to be very careful. And in fact, there's a great piece of research by PricewaterhouseCoopers. They interviewed about 17,000 executives around the world. And the output of that was that if you deliver customer experience excellence, you can expect about a 16% premium on your pricing. So I think, you know, that's really where the value proposition is going. And I would say, you know, look to bundle packages rather than price cuts. Look to add more services to what you're already doing rather than pricing. And then I think, you know, for me, probably a really interesting, and Martin, this is kind of back into your space. Again, the insight is customer complaints are soaring the world over. Every sector, every country in the world, customer complaints going through the roof. And there's a whole reason for that. Customer expectations going through the roof. People buying online now when the online companies aren't necessarily prepared for the, and so on and so on. And I think for me, what we're going to see, and I'm having lots of conversations with Martin, it'd be interesting to bounce back this to you, whereas we're finally seeing that corporations are going to now invest in their contact center staff skills, because up till now, most of them were quite comfortable working off a script. Today, the vulnerable people we're working with, it's back to this emotional intelligence, isn't it? It's like we need to start hiring better people to do that customer complaint. So they're kind of four that I just roll out, kind of trends for next year based on the conversation we've had so far.
And just to come quickly on that point, there is no avoiding the fact that the issues, the frontliner, they're going to be the first people that come across these issues and need to deal with them. And so they need additional skill, they need additional capability, they need additional support, they need more empowerment to make those decisions there and then, so that actually they can deliver the right outcomes to customers first time, rather than needing to go through a whole escalation and approval process in order to get that done. So complaints teams, frontline colleagues are becoming so important in terms of actually delivering that experience and those right outcomes earlier for customers.
Brilliant. We have a question in for David and Tony from Georgina. And Georgina is wondering, it's all, she really gets all the employee side of it and how you've worked with your employees and staff. But talk to us a little bit about how you spoke to customers and how you communicated with customers, especially in the first sort of months of the lockdown.
Well, very early on, when our frontline staff were starting the CX training, it had an impact, as I said earlier, and I could see in their emails, they were making it more personable to the customer. They were trying to very quickly make it more easy for the customer to understand the message and what it was all about. So even speaking to them on the phone, I could hear it and I can see it in emails. It was CX had an impact straight away. They were just personalizing stuff, making it more individual to that customer and that response, and making the customer feel more valued.
Brilliant.
And Julian, Georgina's also asked, how did we identify the CX drivers? Well, I'll take you back to the meeting we had with this large national retailer who had based, and I use this word faith quite deliberately.
What industry were they in, David?
They're confectioners.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're getting pretty busy now because it's in the lead up to Christmas, and in particular with the second lockdown, because everything will be online. But you know, they asked for a meeting with us. They came mob-handed, including their CEO. And you know, just looking at the CX drivers, you know, I trust you. You know me. You make it easy. You get me. You deliver on your promise. You fix things. And we have a real bond. All of those played out. We were able to say, you know, they were looking at us almost slightly nervously, saying, "You can't let us down." And we were able to tell them what decisions we made, what commitments we made, what we put in place to be able to ensure that we were going to look after them. And you know, I jokingly say it's all your fault that I've had to spend all this money. But actually, CX changes your thinking, and it prompts decisions, and it made those decisions that much easier. So that, you know, ultimately the most important driver is I trust you, and there's no grey area there. We have to make sure that we deliver to the. I mean, the demand is going up and up. We had an increase in demand yesterday. And we are not going to let them down. And when all of this is over, when we sort of flop into our armchairs on Christmas Day, we know that we've got their trust and their faith. And because we know them, because we've made it easy for them, because we've got them, because we've delivered on our promise, and you know, in spite of the fact that our suppliers are in a real mess, we're fixing it for them. You know. And the most important thing is we're communicating with them.
Brilliant.
On an hourly, daily, weekly basis.
Yeah.
Yes, Mike?
Julian, just Dave, back to Dave's point there. We're in the middle, or I'm in the middle of a major project in Malaysia with one of the consistent kind of leading CX champions in the world. I'm not going to get into the detail. They're kind of in the delivery world. Okay, they're phenomenal, fantastic. And it's really interesting. I'm doing a deep dive with the leadership team, but also with their staff and also customers. And as we're going through this, it's quite amazing. And I'm learning so much from David and Tony's approach here, which is the staff keeps saying to us, you need to teach the people upstairs what CX is all about. They think CX is about customer service. And the leadership teams are going, we need consistent CX delivery every day. This company in Malaysia has about 6,000 employees. I mean, so you can imagine, and as I'm hearing this, I'm going, you know what really the solution here is that I think the leadership team really need to understand this, do the courses before they start getting into this. You know, because ultimately what will happen is the staff will all come on board and they'll do courses, etc., which is great. But I think you know, what I'm hearing here today is when you get the buy-in at top, when they understand everything that's going on, we now have proper traction. If we don't do that, it kind of, you know, you got to do this, and people aren't really buying into it. So I'm fascinated. I really am about how you approach. And David, I remember you saying to me earlier on that your management team, you used to have meetings once a week with your colleagues who were doing the courses and asking, what have we learned today and stuff. So you really engaged.
So that is a synopsis. The assignments. On anyone considering doing the course, one piece of advice I would consider you should consider is to create teams for the assignments and get them to write their feedback, their findings. I then got all those together, consolidated them into one email and sent it out to everybody. This is what we've learned from this. I mean, I was just looking through them there because there was, you know, there's one phrase that we've all banned, which is sorry for the inconvenience caused. I hate it, and we all hate it, and because it's just a throwaway line. And those are the sort of things that but this all I was doing was just producing a précis of what everybody else had thought. And so that we've all learned from each other. So there's a bit of horizontal learning going on as well.
At the end
Brilliant.
of every module. That was good.
Brilliant. So, Martin, will you leave us any good little anecdotes from us from some of your 5,000 customers around the world?
So I'll tell you what I really like. This kind of warmed my heart a little bit a couple of weeks back. So working with somebody in the States that's in the subprime sector, yeah, and of course their job is to try and get money out of people and things like that. But what they said they want to do is they want to make sure that their customers, that every contact call, they want to build in customer experience. Now, you would think subprime lender collecting money, all you want to do is just get money out of them, but they are talking about that they want to make sure they get a better customer experience than that. They don't just want it to be what money can you pay and when, and make it very, very transactional. Because what they recognize is the only way that both of them are going to get the outcome that they want is for both people to want that. You know, the customer has got to want to pay, you know. So the fact that in that kind of sector, in that type of organization, in that country, that they are really focusing on how we can deliver customer experience, that again just gave me really real hope for the future. And you think if you can do that in that space, then you can just do that everywhere.
And we also talk a lot about customer experience and embedding cultural change within companies and how slow that is. David and Tony, I mean, I know you guys are run off your feet right now, but you've got to keep it going. I mean, you know, you can't just sit still now. So, I mean, I know you're going to flop into your armchair on Christmas Day, but January 2, you're going to need to get out of the chair. You know, I mean, you must be thinking about that going forward.
Julian, the one thing I would say about CX from our perspective is that it's not just flicking on a light switch. There's some work involved, and it takes time.
It's a journey, not a destination. Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. Mike, what do you think about that? How do you keep CX fresh in a company? How do you keep things going? I know we don't want to keep people all day here, but I mean, it's interesting.
Look, I think it's been proven, and it came up, and as I think, Tony, you mentioned earlier on, when you do it CX well, the results are immediate. It's fascinating, and I think, you know, for me, you know, when I'm a marketeer at heart, so I've been very much involved in communication stuff, and the work that I used to do in years, I used to love it and very passionate about it, but it would take months and sometimes years before you would see the impact. When you do the CX really well, the feedback is immediate, the results are immediate. And I think we're very lucky with that discipline. And that's why I like to remove all the fluffiness. Let's keep the language really, really simple. But when you do it well, you get these immediate results, and that's what keeps us going. And it energizes and motivates, and it's fascinating. And you know, I do remember when we started getting heavily, Julie, you remember the days when we became a very significant digital agency. We were designing websites for some of the biggest companies. It was phenomenal the work we were doing. But no one ever understood a bloody word we said.
Yeah.
I mean, it was ridiculous. We were using language, and they're all going, "What are you talking?" When you're doing the CX and people understand you, again, that's another thing that I keep seeing. They buy into it, and it just naturally happens. But I do think the immediacy of an investment in CX is really what keeps us all going.
Yeah, absolutely. One question from Graham, thanks Graham for sending it in, is about suppliers. And I mean, David and Tony, I mean, your suppliers, I mean, you've spoken to us about problems you've had with your suppliers and stuff like that. Is there any sort of thoughts about, you know, getting together with them and talking to them about CX and talking, you know, trying to sort of move that conversation to your suppliers to get them to understand the importance of all this?
We're a slightly weird beast because 50% of our turnover is one product, corrugated board. So our relationship with our suppliers is really important. Actually, we were over-reliant on one supplier. And one of the things that the CX training and the CX thinking has engendered is a move away from that. That we've actually brought in more suppliers than the last. And actually, it's been life-saving because they're all in a mess at the moment. Yes, you know, getting a closer understanding a relationship with suppliers is important, but we found that actually getting too close to one supplier is too risky. But the thinking behind that, the driver behind that, is the effect it has on our customers.
Brilliant. Guys, I'm going to bring this to a close. I'd really like to thank everybody for participating. But David, I'd just love you to leave us with 1 or 2 sentences about your year and just sum it up for us, and what's going to what you're looking forward to, and how you're looking forward to coming out of all this also.
Well, we entered the year thinking it was going to be a normal year, and it's been anything but. We've faced down a huge amount of uncertainty with some confidence, and that confidence has allowed us to meet some exceptional challenges, extraordinary challenges that none of us believed would happen. I mean, if you'd have asked me at the beginning of March that we were going to be busier now than we've ever been, I would have asked you what you're drinking, because. But you know, there's the serendipity, there's the good fortune in it. But we have been ready for it, and the real lesson is just make sure you are always ready for the next opportunity. And you know, we're going to be ploughing into next year with some fairly substantial investment plans, because we want to make sure that we continue to be ready for the next wave, the next challenge. And I think the CX training has really helped us, made those decisions so much easier.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
So Martin Canwell from Aptean, thank you so much. Tony from Fencor, thank you so much. David, thank you so much. And Michael, thank you so much. It's been really illuminating and interesting, and let's try and do this again sometime. And I hope everybody
real pleasure.
has enjoyed it.
And thank you, Julian and Michael, for changing the way we think.
Brilliant. And thanks everybody. We've got lots of great comments in from everybody. And thank you so much for attending. And it's been really good.
Great job, Julian. Okay. Well done.
Thanks a million, everybody.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you soon. Bye-bye.